Good afternoon. Earlier this morning I presented my annual report to the General Assembly. This is my first report to the General Assembly since I assumed my mandate as Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights and fundamental freedoms of Indigenous peoples in May of last year. In my report to the Third Committee of the General Assembly, I described the scope of my mandate as Special Rapporteur and the range of activities I have engaged in since taking up the mandate. I highlighted my efforts to coordinate my work with other United Nations mechanisms and with relevant regional institutions. Additionally, I devoted part of my report to the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, which was adopted by the General Assembly about 2 years ago. Since assuming my mandate, I've engaged in a range of activities within the terms of the mandate to monitor the human rights of Indigenous peoples worldwide and to promote steps to improve their human rights conditions. The various activities I have carried out can be described as falling within 4 interrelated areas of work. These are promoting good practices, thematic studies, country reports, and responding to cases of alleged human rights violations. Specifically, over the past year, I've completed reports with recommendations on Brazil and Nepal after missions to those countries, and a report after a visit to Chile to follow up on the report of my predecessor, Professor Rodolfo Staffenhagen. I also conducted missions to assess Indigenous peoples' conditions in Australia, Botswana, the Russian Federation, and a follow-up visit to Colombia. I am still in the process of developing my reports on those visits, and I'd like to express my gratitude to the governments and Indigenous peoples of all those countries visited for their cooperation and support. Throughout my work, I am duly attentive to the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and the broader universe of human rights principles upon which the Declaration builds and forms part. As I note in my report to the General Assembly, the adoption of the Declaration signals the strong commitment of the international community to remedy the historical and ongoing denial of the rights of Indigenous peoples. The Declaration provides a normative framework for mutual understanding and cooperation between Indigenous peoples and states under the principles of equality, self-determination, and respect for diversity, which are basic tenets of the modern human rights system. Following the presentation of my report, I engaged in what I found to be a fruitful dialogue with a number of states concerning the situation of the human rights of Indigenous peoples in many countries of the world and regarding specific aspects of my mandate as Special Rapporteur. Among the particular questions of states related to my coordination, these questions related to my coordination with other United Nations mechanisms that have a specific mandate regarding Indigenous peoples. These other mechanisms are the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues and the Expert Mechanism on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. I also discussed and received questions about best practices, my thematic work, some specific country situations, and other issues. I'd like to reaffirm my strong commitment to my role as Special Rapporteur and acknowledge here with humility the responsibility it represents and thank all those who have supported me and continue to support me in my work.